How's everybody doing? And welcome to the fish room. Today I thought I'd do a little update on the aquariums. So just to go through tank by tank, give you a quick overlook before I dive into them. Over here we have guppies, bristlenose plecos, lots of different strains of plecos. Also growing some moss and wisteria in most of these tanks. Here I have rehomed the piranha, so now we have a tiger Oscar in here. And his name's just Oscar. I like him. He comes up every time I walk in the room. Really fun fish. We have some angelfish over here that I've had for a few years now. Breed these angelfish, but I did buy them like nickel size, dime size, and I bought probably 50 to 70 of them. Grew them all up and sold them as I went, and I kept like the best 10 or 12 for me. I wouldn't say the best, but I just kept a handful of the ones I liked for my own personal tank, and they're doing really well. This tank over here is a little bit cloudy because I just pulled some moss out of there. And you can see right there as I was watching, there's a lot of debris on the left side of the tank. I kind of backed off my water changes for a while and let the plants do their thing, and I kept pulling plants out. So the nitrates didn't get really high, but I've had a lot of plecos in this tank, and I still do. I just sold probably 50 plecos this month out of this tank, probably about 2-inch size, and it's still just a lot of plecos, but the fish are doing well. They're real healthy. It's just a little cloudy now. I put a new sponge filter, or an old new sponge filter in there, and it just doesn't filter the water as well, so I think I'm going to swap that out. I think that's part of the problem. Anyways, we're going to go through all these tanks. It's probably the hardest one to look at, but we'll go through. I got these 4 55-gallon tanks. We're going to jump in here. We got my cat over there too. Callie's checking it out. I also put a little 2.5 circle tank in my living room. I'll give an update on that, and some possible tanks I'm going to install in the future. I want to get you guys' opinions and your feedback. I'm going to go through all 4 tanks here. I'm going to feed them, tell you what I'm feeding each fish, and then we'll go back at the end of the video kind of briefly, and we'll check out some more of the plecos. Once you get some weight in there, they really start to gather up. So all these tanks, I have like these DIY lids. If you ever see those videos where they do them, and you go like Home Depot or like Lowe's, and they sell, it's like a greenhouse siding, I believe it's called. Just a clear lid, but I went through each of my tanks and I drilled circles on them. Just little holes I can feed, and it's really a game changer when it comes to feeding multiple tanks. Especially if you're feeding multiple times a day, you don't have to take the whole lid off. You can do little doors and stuff where you kind of cut a hole and then put a lid on it. But I just drilled these 4 holes in each of the tanks. 1 hole in each of these 4 tanks, and it really just makes a game changer when you're going around feeding the fish. You kind of can pick your feeding area, and then if you ever want to, I have these algae wafers, you kind of just slide them through the grooves of the front of the tank. So in this tank, it's actually pretty neat. I have a betta fish up front, and I'll take the camera and go a little bit closer here. Here we have a blue crown tail betta, and he's been doing great in here for a few years now. He's getting a little bit older, he's slowing down a bit, but he loves just sleeping in the wisteria. Bettas do not do great in a tank with hang-on filters or overflows. They definitely can do it though. I've seen them do well. They just, as they get older, it's a little bit harder on them. Having that slower moving water in places they can hide really helps. Their fins can't get sucked up against those intakes as well. So he's been doing really well in here. As I said, he is getting a little bit older, and it's a little bit later at night, and I turned the lights were off and I turned them back on. So fish are all a little bit more sleepy, but we have the guppies over here feeding as well. I've been breeding more of a variety of guppies. Still going for nice colors, nice fins, good body shape, but I'm not very picky on the type of color. So I kind of enjoy having the variety in here. I think it helps your genetics. And to be honest, I'm not trying to sell $30 pair guppies or anything anymore. I'm just kind of selling locally. I enjoy guppies. They're one of my favorite fish, so I like having them and just kind of seeing what the tank evolves to. But there's a lot of nice variety in this tank, so I definitely like it. I get some like albino strains every once in a while. You have your cobra patterns. I'll still get some of my yellow half blacks and the delta tails, but it's not the most perfect strain right now, but I enjoy them. They're still fun. Down here we have a lot of the plecos. You can see this tank. I have a breeding cave here. I have a couple of them kind of dig out little caves, and they'll even breed under this moss. But we have commons, longfin commons, albinos, lemon blue eyes. I have a albino longfin. There's some super reds in this tank. I have more in the other, but there's still a few in here. I'll have to spot a couple. You can see some of the lemon blue eyes back there on the wood. My other tank has a lot more of my calicos and my super reds. Up here you can see one of the calicos is a nice, called like a red marble, so it's the darker version. There's a few names for each species, I would say. But that's pretty much it. I can see another calico or two back there. Like I said, we're growing the moss below. I have a little bit of Java fern back there, and the wisteria always grows. This tank will just, last time I cleaned it, the moss grew all the way up to here, and the wisteria grew into it almost. But the tank was super balanced. The fish loved it, so a little bit harder to see because it takes away some of the light. We're going to go ahead and move our way over to the Oscar tank now. Hopefully there are some plecos kind of swarming in on these algae wafers. We might jump back to those to see how it looks, but it's really cool to watch these guys feed. That could almost be a whole separate video itself, just pleco feeding video. So if you guys want to see something like that interests you, let me know. We can definitely do a pleco specific, kind of like a slow video, and just watch them come down. Cause it's kind of cool how they come onto the food and they compete, and just all the fish just come out of every corner of the tank and they show up on the food. So it's pretty neat to watch. Jumping over the Oscar tank here, this really has become one of my favorite fish. I enjoy the Angelfish tank because they're larger fish like him, and they're very good feeders, so they come up and kind of greet you when you feed them. And I think that doesn't get talked about enough with the aquariums. Not only having cool looking fish, but also fish that have a little bit of personality. And just any healthy fish will really do it. Come up to the front of the tank and they'll feed and they'll be personable. But the larger fish do have a little bit more personality. He's gone through a couple different types of food. Right now I'm giving some floating pellets, and he just kind of crushes these. He'll eat like 8 of these big size pellets. I'll put the link in the description for the food I'm using on him. And I got him, it had to have been just a few months ago, and he was not big at all. He's probably like 1.5 inches. It's kind of crazy how they sell these fish so commonly, but also is a really cool fish, so I do understand it. It's really cool how they can kind of fire up and color up, and then they'll also dull down to hide whenever they're in different moods and different things happen. Really been enjoying this fish though. He comes up to the front of the tank every time I come over. Even if I don't have food, he'll kind of like interact with you and swim up at the front of the glass. So really cool fish. I had the prawn in here. I was excited to feed him all the time, but he was really just really skittish fish. Even when I put guppies in there, he wouldn't really eat them right away. Sometimes I think he started eating algae wafers, I swear. But he got so big still, so he was eating, and he's healthy, but I did rehome him to someone else. He probably need more of a pack. I've had different personalities of piranhas in the past between me and friends and other people I know, where sometimes they're super aggressive, they're swimming around all the time, and sometimes they're real skittish and they like to hide. But I'm a lot happier with the Oscar in here, and I think it's more of a nice fish. Hopefully in the future he gets real nice and big. We can get him a nice 90 gallon or like a 120 or something like that. But we have plenty of time for that. Along with the Oscar, I do have some bristlenose plecos in here. I got some swordtails just hanging out. I pulled out a ton of moss and wisteria from his tank, so it's a lot brighter now, a lot easier to see whenever you're trying to find where the fish are at. And even though he's no piranha, he actually eats guppies a lot better. So if I ever have a call or something that is undesirable to breed, I don't want to kind of hurt the strain over time, I will feed him to the Oscar, and he's a lot of fun to feed, and they don't last long. So he's a very fun fish to feed. But we'll go ahead and jump over to the Angelfish tank now, and we'll make this video not too long. So the Angelfish gets, I'll give him an algae wafer because there are some plecos in there I'm trying to breed just kind of on the side. And they'll get this type of flake food I'll use. The Angelfish and the guppies being the same flakes recently. If anything, I try to give the Angelfish a little bit of the bigger flakes, and then the more crushed up stuff will go to the guppies. But like I said, they just feed so easily, even after me turning the lights off and back on. Because it's at night right now after work, so when I came home the timer was just kicked off for a little bit, and I kicked them back on. But this tank is super cool to come up and just feed them. I'll try to zoom in on them, but I know it's a lot steadier when it's on the stand. I think I have 10 angelfish in here now. I kept 12 when they're about half that size, and I've lost 1 or 2, mainly from aggression. But when you keep those numbers up, they definitely calm down a lot more. You can even see in the back left, the one fish is not coming over. That's probably a female looking to lay eggs or guarding eggs. If I look closely, she might have some back there. Whenever it comes to breeding, things I've found out that helps a lot. Cut the lights off for a day or 2, or put the lights on blue. Whenever you have a big school of angelfish, you don't want them getting more aggressive and more active. Cutting those lights off or putting them on the blues definitely helps calm them down. I've done that before and actually saved the angelfish from doing that. Check your temperature. One thing I did a few months ago that I didn't even notice on purpose was the heater failed. So it was still summertime coming into fall, so the house wasn't too cold, but the water was around like 73 degrees. The heater stopped working and the fish were super skittish. They wouldn't eat when I was in front of them. When I walked by the tanks, they would jump around and kind of hit off the walls, which they've never done the whole time I've had them. So all of a sudden they were acting differently. Sometimes that's whenever they're breeding, but for this case, the temperature in the tank got a lot lower and I didn't notice because of all the plants growing out top. I didn't really put my hand in the tank often because I was just feeding through from above, and it was in between water changes. So that's one thing to definitely keep an eye on for any tank. Every couple days, every once in a while, once a week or so, check the temperature of your tank. I have a temperature gun I'll use, which is very helpful. It's right here. I can just hold on the tank, it'll give me a temperature. So right now it's at 79. You can hold it right above to get a more accurate reading into the water. That's very helpful. I also recommend using a thermometer with your heater. So if it's a larger tank, they sell these they have an actual digital thermometer that goes in the tank and then the heater plugs into that. So it doesn't just heat hot or cold, it heats off of the actual thermometer. So make sure it's obviously in the water. I've never had problems with that, but that's one thing I would say to someone who's never used them. If it's out in your air and the heater's in there, that could be a danger. So if you ever have evaporation for a while and it's at the top of the tank, just be aware of that, make sure everything's secured, but that's all in the instructions. Just kind of a little side note, guys, check out your heaters. But yeah, angelfish are doing really well. They breed every so often and they kind of just eat the eggs because I don't really try to pull the eggs right now. Downsizes on the tanks and the room for breeding, but really enjoying this tank. And we're going to go ahead and move to the last tank though. I'll try to not make this video too long. Feed this tank here, they give the crushed flakes for the guppies, and then I'll give a lot of algae wafers to this tank. I do give like 6 a day at least. Sometimes I'll give a little bit extra. I'll give like 8 or so in the morning, or if I do morning and night, I'll do like 4 and then 2 or 3. So that's kind of why this tank's so cloudy. A lot of it's just how much the plecos are eating. And I swear when they eat that much, they're not really digesting it all, so it's kind of just a little bit of the food gets mixed into the gravel. So I'm actually going to go ahead and show you the round tank, and let's come right back to this one. Hopefully get the plecos kind of swarming around those algae wafers, because they're kind of hidden out in the moss right now. So here you have my little circle tank. I think it's a 2.5 gallon. I've had this tank for years and years, and I actually took down a larger tank from someone else recently, from a customer, and they had some leftover gravel, they had some plants, some decorations. So really had this tank just hanging out in the basement, and I had all the supplies to set up a tank, and I already had cycled water and everything. So I've set this tank up in a night, and I've been really enjoying it, just having something out by the TV where you can see the fish whenever you're not in the fish room. It's just kind of a cool environment. It's really simple setup. What I did here is I added the gravel that I had all the way up to the filter. So we're gonna test this out, but the filter in the back, it's connected with the light, which is like my only thing I don't like about this tank, where you can't have the filter running and then turn the light off. I mean, you can. The filter will run, you turn the light off, and you go blues, off, and on, but you can't have it on a timer, because if you had it on then off, the filter would cut off at night. It's my only downside to this tank, so I do have to manually change the light, but I usually like having it on when I come home, so I can turn it off at night, so it doesn't bother me too much. But like I was saying, we filled the gravel all the way up to the filter, so it's kind of acting as an under gravel filter here. And then it also has its little filter socks in the back. And I threw I threw a ton of moss in here from my other tanks, hoping this will just kind of coat through the bottom. Got a little decoration there, and that's a fake plant in the back. Threw 4 guppies in here. What my plan to do on this tank is I want to do some dwarf frogs. I'm thinking about getting like 4 dwarf frogs or so in this tank, and just kind of think it'd be a fun tank. It's not heated, so the guppies are tolerating it. They don't mind. Right now it's around 73 degrees or so. These are all my own guppies I've raised, and I've kind of over time intentionally got them to be more adapted to lower temperatures, and also just planted tanks, less frequent water changes. Still keeping the nitrates tolerable, but I don't want them to be so sterile that they don't handle change well. So I've kind of put them through a little bit intentionally, and I really think it's for the better. I think it's how guppies kind of used to be kept, and no one thought twice about it. But over time, things can get a lot more complicated, and sometimes it's beneficial. Sometimes I think it's a little bit too much. So we're keeping this tank real simple. They've been doing good for about a week. Letting the tank just stabilize, feeding very minimal. So once the tank's showing stable nitrates and nitrates, no ammonia, which it really shouldn't spike at all, I'm going to go ahead and get some frogs in here. Don't want to put them in too soon because I know I want them to eat a lot when they're new. So if they're hungry, I'm going to feed them, because that's kind of the only test whenever you get new fish or frogs or any animal, is getting them to eat. So if they're hungry, I'm not going to feed them less. So I want to make sure this tank can handle them, and then we're going to go ahead, maybe get 2 or 3 at a time and see how it goes. But excited about this tank. It's real simple, but I think it's a fun little circle tank for the living room where I can kind of walk by and always see it. So it's been a few minutes here that I walked away from this tank and I fed them. As I walked in the room, they all kind of jumped away, but let's go ahead and get a quick look at the plecos in this tank. You can see a real large common longfin there. We have a calico longfin, some larger plecos in this tank, a bunch of babies. The one thing I do notice after you let them breed for so long is you kind of lose how much babies are producing. There's some nice super reds in the back. Hard to see with how cloudy the water is becoming. Mostly just from the fish kicking up all the substrate. Straight backs, another red marble, a lot darker of a color, but you can, without the cloudiness, he's got the orange tail and face. Right there on the left's more of a orange and red. I can kind of see with myself, I don't know if you guys can see, there's super red back there. It's so cloudy, but a lot of cool plecos in this tank. It's always fun to feed them, just see them kind of come out of every corner of the tank and just all gather in one area. I did sell a decent amount of guppies out of this tank, but there's still some nice fancy guppies in here. I've been working on getting the body shapes a little bit stronger and the tails a little bit more like of a delta tail where it's edged off and doesn't have that kind of rippled tail. Like I said about the last tank, very similar setup and kind of same intentions on the fish. But I think this video has gone long enough. I appreciate you guys for watching. If you made it all the way to the end of the video, let me know below. Leave some comments, let me know how you guys are doing. I know I've been a lot less consistent with my videos, but I feel like I shared a lot of things over the years, and after a while I don't want to kind of just keep talking about the same stuff. But whenever I have things that are kind of new or updates, I really do like sharing and kind of documenting the journey of the tanks and everything going on. But thanks again for watching, guys. Check out some of my older videos. I'll link them up on the screen here. I hope you guys are having a good night, good day. If you're not already subscribed, go below and hit that subscribe button. It doesn't cost you anything. Helps out the channel a little bit. But thanks again a lot for watching, and I'll talk to you guys soon.